Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today it's time to have a look at the Naval passed to developers for May of 2022. There wasn't anything for the helicopters, so we're going to leave that be. The next video after this will probably be the mechanics part, which there isn't too much of either, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, let's get into the naval vehicles. The Germans have the Spähkruzer from 1940, which wasn't exactly completely finished, so we'll see about its general story. Basically, it starts on the 27th of January in 1939, where Hitler approved the naval building program known as Plan Z. The considerations on the contents of Plan Z also included oceanic naval warfare with heavy naval units. For battleships to be used in this field of activity, adequate support by supplementary naval vessels was deemed to be necessary. On the one hand, the concerned aircraft carriers, which were supposed to provide protection against opposing aircraft, and on the other hand, ships such as destroyers were needed, which due to their high speed and maneuverability were able to take action against attacking submarines or light enemy units. The principal shortcoming of current destroyers that existed at the time of the development of Plan Z was that their range was inadequate. Their supply of fuel and oil did not allow for continuous operation with battleships in the Atlantic. The accompanying destroyers would have to frequently rely on tanker support, refueling relatively often. A decrease in range and a decrease in formation speed during the refueling process represented a risk factor in the course of the undertaking. A solution had to be found by developing a relatively small, fast, and durable ship with sufficient range and armament. The solution was the development of a large destroyer. The increased dimensions and space could be utilized for a more efficient propulsion system for high speed and range, with increased fuel tankage. Like later German designs, these ships received a mixed propulsion system consisting of geared turbines for high speed supplemented by diesel engines for cruising. Since the projected displacement of the design had increased from that of a standard destroyer to that approaching a light cruiser, the designation Spähkruzer, which meant reconnaissance cruiser, was proposed for this class of ship. Although named Spähkruzer, these ships were essentially scaled-up destroyers, larger and more heavily armed than their World War I Emden and capable of extended operations in the Atlantic. It was planned to use these ships in combination with the new battleships of the Z plan in the Atlantic, where the Spähkruzer would be the eyes of a larger military battle fleet. In summary, the task of the Spähkruzer can be outlined as followed. 1. Accompaniment and providing security for heavy units operating individually or in formation in the context of oceanic naval warfare. 2. Supporting heavy units in tactical warfare, for example, as a suitable weapon against light enemy units engaged in providing convoy security. And 3. Independent use of naval in warfare against weak enemy units. Based on a traditional destroyer design, several project studies started in 1938 to develop a destroyer the size of a light cruiser. With the lessons learned from the initial opening naval actions of World War II, the design of the Spähkruzer was modified several times. After the Spähkruzer in 1938, improved designs were called the Spähkruzer 1939 and 1940, which offered differing engine configurations, range, secondary armament, armor protection, and provisions for an AR-196 float plane or torpedoes. An order for 3 units of the Spähkruzer 1940 was placed on the 17th of February 1941 to Germianwerft in Kiel, superseding the cancelled destroyers, the Z-40, Z-41, and Z-42. The first keel was laid down on the 20th of August 1941 under the construction numbers number 671 to 673. However, the ordered vessels initially retained the destroyer designations Z-40, 41, and 42 until December of 1941, when they were renamed to SP-1, SP-2, and SP-3. Unfortunately, construction proceeded slowly after the loss of the construction plans and documents as a result of the enemy air raid. Construction was eventually stopped in April 1942 in order to focus on the construction of standard destroyers and U-boats. So these are vehicles that were hardly even laid down, never mind anything else. The next vehicle is the HMS Renown, which of course is a beautiful machine and designed for the Royal Navy and was actually built. Basically, this machine was built during the First World War. The HMS Renown was the lead ship of 2 battlecruisers built for the Royal Navy. The overall design is fair to say it was pretty hasty, with Admiral Fisher ordering the preliminary plans and subsequently built in only 15 months. With 10 days prepared for sketch designs, he wanted a 32 kiloton ship mounting 15-inch guns, originally only 4 in 2 twin turrets. However, this was quickly added to for a total of 6 in 3 pairs. It was built at Fairfield and laid down in January of 1915, and it would be quickly commissioned in September 1916 and given the pennant number 72. Renown narrowly missed the Battle of Jutland and would not see any conflict during the First World War. Between the wars, Renown was refitted and reconstructed twice, with the first increasing her armor protection and the second a much more thorough overhaul. Work on this second refit was carried out between September 1936 and August 1939, resulting in her joining the Home Fleet for the outbreak of the Second World War. During the reconstruction, her superstructure was replaced with a new splinter-proof version as seen earlier on the HMS Warspite. Her engines were replaced by Parson turbines, saving approximately 2,800 tons of weight, which allowed conversion of forward boilers to armored magazines. A catapult and aircraft hangar was also built similar to that of the repulse aft of the superstructure, and her main armament was also upgraded to Mark I N variants, which increased maximum elevation to 30 degrees and subsequent maximum range. Her secondary battery and anti-aircraft suite was also improved, with her original 4-inch guns replaced with 20 DP QF 4.5-inch Mark III guns in twin mountings. Both of these ships thus developed something of a derisive nickname of refit and repair, given the length of time that they would spend under such circumstances. Her service life during the Second World War was eventful. First, she joined the hunt for the Admiral Graf Spee, and after missing out on the action, later engaged both Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau. She would later take part in the Battle of Cape Spartivento before being summoned to join the hunt for the battleship Bismarck in the North Atlantic. Most of her time after this was spent on convoy escorts to the Soviet Union, whilst also becoming deputy fleet flagship temporarily, covering the HMS Duke of York. In late 1942, she was assigned to Force H to participate in Operation Torch, covering potential French or Italian intervention. During the war, she would be in for numerous refits and repairs, seeing the installation of new radars, increased anti-air battery to 72 20mm AA guns from July 1942 to August of 1943, additional AA directors, and a quadruple 40mm mount atop B turret in January of 1944. After returning Prime Minister Winston Churchill from the Quebec Conference, Renown was then assigned to the Eastern Fleet to take part in Operation Cockpit and Operation Transom, before being placed into reserve in May of 1945. She would eventually be broken up for scrap in August of 1948, and was the last of Fisher's battlecruisers to survive. So overall, definitely a interesting vehicle with a bunch of different variants that could easily be added to the game. The next vehicle is the later variant of the Miyoko class heavy cruiser, the Ashigara from 1945. Has a pretty fun history as well. The IJN Ashigara was the last ship of the Miyoko class heavy cruisers, which were active in World War II. In the fall of 1924, the Admiralty placed an order for the construction of 4 Miyoko-class heavy cruisers at the Kawasaki shipyards in Kobe. The ship was laid down on the 11th of April 1925. The cruiser was named after Mount Ashigara, located between Shizuoka Prefecture and Kanagawa Prefecture. The construction of the ship's hull lasted a little over 3 years. Launching took place on the 22nd of April 1928 in the presence of Prince Nashimoto Morimasa. Completion and commissioning of the ship also took over a year. IJN Ashigara had the following dimensions. It was 201,000 meters. It had a 19-meter width and a 6.23 meter draft, or maybe 201 meters. Sorry, not 200. 201,000 meters seems a bit ridiculous. there was also a 93mm anti-torpedo bulge. The hull was flat deck with a significant elevation in the bow, but at the same time, it's quite low-breasted. And despite all this, she had pretty good seaworthiness, and the stem was an S-shaped. The IJN Ashigara also began the Second World War as a Cruiser Division 16 flagship, acting in conjunction with the ships from Cruiser Division 4, the Maya, and also the DES Division 5, the Matsukaze and the Azakaze, while they participated in the invasion of the North Philippines. After supporting the landing operations, she returned to Mako on the 14th of December 1941. The Ashigara accompanied General Masaharu Homa's 14th Army landing in Lingayen Gulf on the 22nd of December 1941, and after it, on the 26th of December, the cruiser left Mako for Takao. On the 26th of February 42, Miyoko and destroyer Inazuma arrive at Makassar from Sasebo and join Ashigara. Destroyers the Ikazuka and Akebono, all ships sortie the same day in the Java Sea. And then in March of 1942, the Ashigara took part in the Battle of the Java Sea, was involved in the sinking of the heavy cruiser the HMS Exeter and destroyer the HMS Encounter. During the refit on the 9th of April 1943, the cruiser received a new Type 21 air search radar. The AA armament was also strengthened. 2 twin mounts of 25mm Type 96 AA guns were installed near the main mast, and after the refit, the Ashigara was again assigned to the Cruiser Division 16's flagship. Service in a distant theatre of operations was not rife with events. The cruiser was docked again in October of 43 in Singapore. In early January, the Ashigara took part in the transport of troops to Mergui, and in February, she was assigned to the Cruiser Division 21, 5th Fleet, in the northern area. After it, the cruiser visited Sasebo, where in March 44 she underwent another repair and modernization, and in the aft part, 8 additional 25mm guns were installed, as well as a new Type 22 surface search radar. Later, Ashigara was based on Ominato. Until June of 44, she once again missed a major battle in the Mariana Islands. In September 44, she departed to Curie for a refit. Once again, traditionally AA armaments were enforced. This time, 24 25mm guns were installed at once, 2 twin mounts in the bow and stern, and 20 single mounts. As a result, the total number of AA armament reached 48 guns, which in the absence of an advanced fire control system didn't solve the problem of the ship's short-range air defense. A new Type 13 air search radar was installed on the main mast with a detection range of 100 kilometers for aircraft groups and 50 kilometers for a single aircraft. The surface search radar was also replaced. Now the cruiser was equipped with a Type 22 number 4 surface search radar, which could detect a large ship at a distance of 25 kilometers. In addition, it was possible to carry out fire correction. After refit, she underwent to the sea once again. In mid-October 44, Ashigara, as part of the Vice Admiral Shima Kiyohide's force, took part in an attempt to pursue the defeated American fleet, which attacked the island of Formosa. In fact, the Japanese were opposed by a fully combat-ready and significantly superior force in the American fleet. Unfortunately, or fortunately, aerial reconnaissance timely reported enemy forces, and the Japanese ships returned to base. Soon there was a message about the beginning of the American landing in the Philippines, and almost all the combat-ready forces of the Japanese Navy were thrown into the decisive battle. The 24th of October 44, Ashigara and Nachi departed Koron to support Vice Admiral Nishimura Soji's first raiding force, the Bat Division 2 of the Yamashiro and Fuso, and the Cruiser Division 7 of the Mogami. Having reached Surigao Strait, Ashigara and Nachi, at about 4:20 that night, picked up 2 targets on their Type 22 surface search radar. Vice Admiral Shima ordered a torpedo attack, and the cruisers turned to starboard to bring their tubes to bear. At 4:27, each cruiser launched 8 torpedoes by radar, but obtained no hits. But after colliding of the Nachi and the Mogami at 4:29, Shima's orders were his force to retire. In October of 1944, on the 26th, the Ashigara and also the Kasumi and Ushio overtake heavily damaged Kumano, limping towards Koron. And then at 16:30, the group arrives at Koron, where they refuel from oiler Nichiel Maru. Then, on the 27th, the Ashigara departs Koron and with Nachi and DES Division 7. The Ashigara detaches for Palawan. Then, on the 4th of June 1945, Ashigara, together with the destroyer Kamikaze, can't make this up, sailed from Singapore to Batavia through the Banga Straits. They arrived there safely. On the 7th of June, Ashigara, with 1,600 army troops and 489 tons on board of cargo, left the port and headed to Singapore. At the exit from the port, the cruiser was spotted by submarine USS Blueback and also USS Chubb, which couldn't attack it, but transmitted information about its course and speed. On the 8th of June at 11:48 a.m., IJN Ashigara was seen from submarine HMS Trenchant. At 12:09, from a distance of approximately 4,700 yards, the submarine fired at the Ashigara 8 Mark 8 torpedoes from her bow and deck torpedo tubes. The cruiser's lookout spotted the torpedoes, but she was trapped between the shore and the minefield. Ashigara still tried to comb the torpedoes, but cannot complete the maneuver in time because of her inoperable port engine. She is hit in the starboard by 5 torpedoes, but continues moving ahead by inertia, completely obscured by smoke. Her 25mm AA guns opened fire briefly, targeting the HMS Trenchant's periscope, and the crew of the cruiser tried to save the ship to the last, but at 12:39, the Ashigara capsized to the starboard and disappeared underwater. The place of the sinking was soon approached, called by radio IJN Kamikaze, who managed to take on board 853 crewmen and about 400 army troops. On the 9th of June, they were taken to Singapore. And then on the 20th of August, the heavy cruiser, the Ashigara, was removed from the naval list. I just feel like, even in crazy desperation times, firing at the periscope of a submarine with a 25 is probably not going to be too useful. The machine had 5 dual sets of 203mm, 4 dual sets of 127s, 6 triple sets of 25s, 4 dual sets of 25s, and 28 single mounts of 25s as well, plus also some torpedoes on the board. We also have a battleship for Italy, which is named after a pretty famous person, the Leonardo Da Vinci. And this is a pretty big machine with some pretty big guns. This was designed as part of the Conti di Cavour class. The Leonardo Da Vinci was a response to the French Corvette-class battleships designed by Rear Admiral Masdea. Masdea wished to build upon the flawed Dante Alighieri battleship, which proved to have insufficient armor and also armament. It was recognized that any substantial changes in the ship's design would cause a loss of speed, but this was still comparable to most other battleships of the time. On the other hand, Italy was forced to use 12-inch guns, while the competitor nations were already using 13.4-inch guns. However, this would be remedied by increasing the number of guns on board to 13. On paper, this was considered a good design approach, but a lengthy construction process meant that by the time the first Conti di Cavour ship was completed, it was already outclassed by every new battleship. To make matters more dire, the Italo-Turkish War in 1912 caused a shortage of workers and materials, meaning that Italy had to outsource some of its resources. For example, instead of using Krupp cemented steel, the Italians purchased nickel steel from the Americans and had it refined to their own Terni cemented steel, which was slightly of lower quality and took longer to produce. Leonardo Da Vinci was laid down in 18th of July of 1910 at the Odero shipyard, launched on the 14th of October in 1911, and commissioned on the 14th of May 1914, named after the famous artist of the same name. During most of her World War I career, Leonardo da Vinci saw no active service and stayed in port of Taranto. This was because Admiral de Revel was afraid any incursion into the Adriatic would spell doom for the Italian fleet, which was prone to Austro-Hungarian submarines and mines. It was decided that the Italians would blockade the southern Adriatic with a fleet of smaller vessels, including torpedo boats, while the larger capital ships would remain at anchor. If the Austro-Hungarians wished to make a move with their own battleships, the Italians would sortie the Blue Water Fleet to counter them. This arrangement worked out well for the Leonardo da Vinci until she suffered a catastrophic explosion on the 2nd of August 1916. It is officially believed an Austro-Hungarian saboteur ignited her magazine and the ship exploded into flames. She capsized in Taranto, taking over 200 men with her to the bottom of the harbour. The Regia Marina immediately planned to raise the ship using compressed air and pontoons to lift it from the sea floor. However, this required the ship's funnels, turrets, coal ammunition to be removed to reduce the weight of the hull. Leonardo da Vinci was finally refloated on the 17th of September 1919 after 2 years of work, including dredging a channel from her resting place to the dry dock. Once in dry dock, additional problems mounted as the decks began to fall from the immense weight of the machinery pressing down while capsized. Plans to righting the vessel involved more dredging and using a ballast, about 400 tons, to slowly turn over the ship, whilst water was pumped into her starboard to assist. Leonardo da Vinci was successfully righted on the 24th of January in 1921, and the Regia Marina originally planned to reconstruct the vessel. In the end, the same financial burdens that ceased the Francesco Caracciolo, hit the Leonardo da Vinci, and the ship was eventually sold for scrap in 1923. So it had a pretty sad life, if we're going to be honest. The machine had 13 305mm guns, including 3 triple mounts and 2 dual mounts, 18 120mm guns, 14 76mm guns, and some torpedoes to boot. That is all their stuff, which was passed to developers for Naval in May of 2022. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman675, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Jerry Prevolt, Megadino King, Orange Tail, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Uncle Bean, Sem Arslan, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.